So the general wards. So this is the ward I was on right at the start before the operation. You go through the ICU, HDU, and then general ward. And the general ward is, you kind of there, quite low dependency. Um, the way I looked at it was, or certainly in my experience, the ICU was very much one to one. You have got someone there looking after you 24/7, no matter what you need, what happens, one to one care. And obviously, there's other people in the background. HDU seemed to be more like a 1 to 2, 1 to 3. So you had like one nurse was maybe looking after two of you or three of you in separate rooms, but nothing. They weren't stretched. They still were looking after you, are still quite attentive and all of that sort of stuff. So there's no concerns. And when you go on to the general ward, there's 6 of you in a bay and there's like one nurse looking after you really. So that's the real difference. By the time you get to that general ward, the expectation is you can kind of look after yourself to some extent. You've still got the buzzer, you're still being checked on, your obs are being taken, but just not as frequently. And it's not as attentive because they are looking after more patients. But by the time you get there, you don't necessarily need that level of care. So I was back in the same bay. There was 6 bays in the ward I was in. So it was like the only way I explain it, for along this corridor there was like 5 rooms. There was a couple of side rooms, but 5 rooms. Each room had about 6 bays, so there's about 6 people to a room, and then there was like one lead nurse per bay. So it was a bit more crowded, and privacy wise, you had your curtains all the way around if you wanted, but that's all you've got between you and 5 other fully grown males. You've got the noises, everything going on, and you've got absolutely no protection from it. As funny as that sounds, I couldn't sleep. I thought, oh, general ward, I've got less things coming out of me. I'll be able to have a better night's sleep. Doesn't happen at all. You've got some guy snoring, some coughing and spluttering, people pressing the nurse button, the general noises, and they do lights out, but you've still got like the emergency lights in the background so they can kind of see what's going on. So it was terrible. It was I didn't like it at all being on that ward. I had more independence, so I can sort of get up and out of bed on my own at this point because I didn't have so much stuff on me. I only had my heparin drip and my central line that was still in, but other than that, I was free of everything. So I could kind of get about on the ward. So they had a day room on the ward. So there was a couple of sofas, there was a big TV, there were some magazines, there was tea and coffee facilities, some computers that were set up on the side. I never saw them on. They looked like they were about 15 years old. I never saw anyone on them, but they were there if you wanted to use them, I suppose. There was like a wash area. There was a couple of showers, a couple of washrooms, some toilets, and a kitchen area. And the kitchen area was really just like a fridge and a microwave. And you could put your own stuff in a fridge and label it up if you wanted to and stuff like that. But initially it was nice, it was good, being on a general ward. It was that next step on your recovery because you were kind of, right, I'm a bit more independent. I can get out of bed without a team of nurses trying to get me out of bed. I can kind of go to the toilet as in how I please. Which was a big thing for me. I wanted to do as much as I could, and I'm not, say, 100% not judging people, although it might sound like I am. But for me, even in the middle of the night, I was drinking a lot. Really, I was drinking a lot of water. So I'd be up several times in the night, going to the toilet, and other people would be using the cardboard bottles. And then, like, in the morning, the nurses are having to clear up all of this, like, all the bottles of urine. And these same people are just wandering the wards all the time and having a drink and walking and talking and everything else. But when it comes to going to the toilet, they suddenly turn into people who can't walk or can't, get up and about. So each to their own. I know there was some people have their urine measured for medical reasons, so that's fine. No issues with that. But it was just there was a general difference with some of the mindset on the ward, and it's quite easy when you're there to kind of get pulled into that mindset. So you have to really stay positive, kind of look after yourself, and just focus on your own recovery and what you want to do. So yeah, it was a bit of a weird time really on that ward, because by the Saturday, so after I'd had one night on the ward, I felt good in myself. I was getting a lot more mobile, because I just had the drip, the heparin drip. I was up and down the ward quite a lot. It's quite mobile because I just had the one machine on the stand, so I was able to kind of get up and down, get to the day room, get to the toilets and the washrooms and all of that stuff. I went down for an echo on the Friday when I first went to the general ward and X-rays and things like that, and that was all good. So yeah, you're moving about a lot more. I was quite attentive. I don't know what the correct word is right now, but maybe committed to doing like breathing exercises, to making sure I was sat in a chair several times a day, doing like deep breathing, holding my breath, trying to like expand the lungs and make sure that that was fine and stuff like that. So I was kind of trying to keep quite positive on there, but I was ready to go. I felt at that point I was good to go home. I didn't feel I was getting any benefit from being in the hospital versus like being in my own home with my own comforts and what have you. But obviously that I was only started on Warfarin either the Friday night or the Saturday night, the evening. So it was always at 6 p.m. The Warfarin was given out. So obviously I was nowhere near discharge at that time because I'd only just started on the Warfarin. The heparin at that point was keeping blood thin. So yeah, it was a bit of a slog at that time, but I was really fortunate that I had people come to visit. I had different people, so I had my brother on the Saturday. He came to visit, and then wife and mum came on the Saturday, and then different people on a Sunday, and what have you. So that really helped as well because it broke up the day. It broke up the monotony of being on a general ward, because you need to keep doing different things, keeping your mind active and engaged. And the thing for me, I had to get into a routine of doing different things, and even if it was just doing the same thing but in a different location. So I would make sure I wasn't sat in bed all day, because I was really having trouble sleeping. I thought, if I don't stay in bed, when I get into bed at the end of the day, it's kind of like it's a fresh bed. I haven't slept in it yet today. That might help. So I was kind of like sat in a chair a lot that was next to the bed. I was going to the day room. I was kind of sitting in there, having a drink, reading my phone, listening to music, watching whatever was on TV, whatever people had decided to put on that they wanted to watch. I was kind of just going with a flow with that. But I was kind of making a point that I was getting a little bit of change of scenery as much as you can on a ward. When you're kind of locked down and you've got a drip and you can't go far. So that was really important to me. So, whenever visitors came or whatever, I made a point of going to the day room with them. So we were in there, we'd be in there for 2.5 hours or whatever. And then when they left, I'd go back to the room, sit in a chair and do something, go back to the day, so it was just constantly kind of mixing it up, making sure that you weren't just static in the bed and whatever. So that really, really helped as well. And in general, sort of, the time went quite quick considering, you kind of just sat around, not doing much. I watched some films, watched some TV programs, and I found that as kind of Saturday came around and Sunday, I was able to actually watch more things or focus more. So what I said earlier, when I was in HDU, I found it really hard to focus or just do one thing for more than like 10-15 minutes. By this point, I was able to watch like a whole episode of something. So you could start watching a box set. For me at that time, I was able to start watching a box set and thinking, right, I'm going to do an hour of this and then I'll go and do something else. So that actually helped pass the time, that I was able to focus on a film or on a box set or program or listen to music as well. So, in general, the wards weren't great. They could have been. It would have been nicer to have my own room. I think that would have massively helped, certainly with the sleep aspect. But you can't choose these things, and in the grand scheme of things, for some of those guys on there who were still seriously ill, even though they're on the general ward. For me, I was kind of like on recovery, and I kind of there was at times I was walking around, I felt a bit like a fraud, because I felt good. I felt good in myself, and I looked good, and I didn't feel pale or ill or anything like that. And you've got people who are generally quite ill, and and it kind of puts things into perspective at times, that you're kind of irritated because you can't go home yet, and these people are going to be here for months. So what else on the general ward? Like I say, I had a real struggle near the end with the heparin drip. So the heparin was within range for about 24 hours, and it was happy days. I was going to go to once a day blood tests rather than once every 4 hours, and then they slipped out of range again. But at that point, my central line had been taken, and that's what they were doing all of the bloods with. So by Sunday, Monday time, they'd taken out the central line, but my heparin was still all over the place, all out of whack. So they were going to have to resort back to blood tests every 4 hours. And that's where, the fun started on sort of Monday night and Tuesday, because they were having to take all of the bloods from my right arm, as I mentioned before. The left arm had the heparin drip, so they couldn't take any bloods out of the left arm, because obviously the readings wouldn't have been accurate. So the right arm, I've got a good vein. I've got 2 good veins in that arm, but I'd say they did take a battering that day, and into the night, into the early hours. It was sort of constant blood tests, constant tweaks of the heparin, and I say the warfarin at the time was still low. I think it was like 1.2 for a couple of days, and then 1.4, and then I was kind of, I'd had my last set of bloods done. Say early, probably about 6:30 Tuesday morning, and I was kind of resigned to, I was going to be there till Wednesday or Thursday, dreading more blood tests, because at this point, your arm is like a pincushion. I'm not quite sure how much more, it can take, and then, I had a discussion with the doctor. The doctor came round and she just said, everything's in range. Heparin has suddenly got into range. Your INR is 2.0, and the range we want is 2 to 3. So you're good to go. Heparin we're going to take off now. We're happy that the warfarin has kicked in. We're happy that that's now taken over the anticoagulation method in your blood. So we'll get rid of the heparin machine. So it meant, for me at last, for the first time in God knows how long, I didn't have to drag this machine to the toilet, to the day room, tripping over wires. So they'd done that really quickly, which was fantastic. They took out the cannula, they got rid of the heparin machine. For some reason, for the ward, I don't know if it's specific, but they have a ECG trace machine on you all the time, and that's just another 3 pads on wires to get tangled up. So they were taken off. They took my main incision dressing off and cleaned that, and it all happened like quite quickly. And then pretty much they were saying you could be discharged, and it was so quick that it was, as I mentioned before, it was really unexpected. I had to make some emergency calls for the people who were going to be picking me up, because they were expecting, as we all were, Wednesday or Thursday, and then suddenly here we are Tuesday afternoon, You know, they're practically kicking me out the door, which I wasn't gonna moan about. I was happy, just wanted to be at home, you know, wanted to be home. So I really didn't care that it was all last minute. But it was really good, and you know, I was really pleased the INR got to 2. I know there's a long journey ahead. You know, I'm going to be on Warfarin for life. I'm going to be monitoring this INR level for forever. But there were some dark thoughts in the early hours of mornings where you're having all these bloods taken and your Warfarin hasn't moved. And I know I was really, really early days of taking Warfarin, and they had me on a really low dose because they didn't know how I'd react. And then when they saw that it barely moved, the needle barely moved on the chart, they stuck me straight onto 10 milligrams, and then they started to see that climb. So yeah, I was thinking of everything. I was thinking maybe I'm one of these really, really rare people who Warfarin has absolutely no effects on. What happens? You know, I've just had a mechanical valve put in. I'm stuck on this heparin drip that's so unreliable. You know, the heparin levels are up and down, in and out of range, left, right, and centre. Thinking, God, what have I done? What have I done in this decision and going down a mechanical route? So I was really worried. You know, I didn't have to be, you know, in hindsight, but at the time you start thinking all sorts of things. But yeah, in general, that was kind of it on the general ward. You know, there wasn't much. The end of it went really quick. You know, so it was a very accelerated discharge. I had a pharmacist come round with all of the medication, talking me through obviously coag stuff and all of that, which I'll cover in another video. But it was all very quick. And the reality is, as the consultant was saying, that had I not been on coagulation medication or anticoagulation medication, I probably would have been sent home Saturday. You know, I was doing so well in you know, general health, and mobility, and able to get up and out of bed and what have you, that they were really, really happy. But you know, until I was in range, they couldn't discharge me. So yeah, so I was discharged on a Tuesday from the general ward out into the general population, out into the real world, and that was 7 days all in all from the operation to discharge, which was, you know, fantastic. I would have liked it to have been a little bit sooner. You know, there were some bleak moments on that general ward where naturally you're sharing a ward with other men who are varying degrees of illnesses, varying degrees of, you know, whatever's going on with them, and you know, they're coughing and whatever else is going on with them throughout the night. And you know, it's tough because you know, you try to look after yourself and stay positive, and you know, you can't help but, you know, feel for some of these guys who are around you. And like I say, it comes back to that comment I made about being like an imposter at times, because you kind of walking around, and certainly for me, I felt really good. I was just like, yeah, you know, I'm healthy. I feel good. I'm ready to go home. And you know, you've got people there who are genuinely seriously ill. So yeah, that was it. You know, I was kind of discharged. I packed up my suitcase. I was being met outside of the hospital. Pretty much just a quick pick up and go. So I had to make my own way down to the main reception area. Luckily, I had a case that had wheels on it, so I didn't have to lift it or anything, because it was definitely over 5 kilos. So there's no way I could have carried that down. But you know, I got down to the reception area and I just kind of waited down there probably for the best part of an hour and a half, until my lift turned up. But I was just so pleased to be off that ward. It was so hot. You know, like going back to what I said about being in that the HDU room where I had it so cold. In the general wards, everyone was so cold, so the heating was on and blankets and everything else, and I was there absolutely sweltering. And in general, hospitals are warm anyway, you know, so you've got that issue. But going down to the main reception area of the hospital, I was in a t-shirt. I was joggers in a t-shirt, and it was about 3 degrees Celsius outside. Everyone was in coats, and I was loving it. I was sat there in just a t-shirt, just feeling the fresh air when the automatic doors opened. just feeling a breeze, taking it all in, and just being pleased I wasn't hooked up to anything, and I was going home. So yeah, it was. There's a lot more information that kind of went on, a lot more procedures and things to talk about. But I'm kind of just putting these videos out there, and then if you've got any comments or questions or anything like that, then maybe I can go into a bit more detail on each stage of those.